let's talk a bit about cloud computing, cloud security. I know this is a topic that you really enjoy and you're studying and working on it. What would be
Mhm.
your advice for someone that is interested in learning more about cloud and cloud security right now?
I think it starts from just first of all, just diving into one cloud provider and just like sticking with it, especially when you
Okay.
get started.
Okay.
Like pick a cloud provider, AWS, Azure, GCP, like one of those three major cloud providers because that's what people really care about. Pick AWS or Azure or GCP. For example, I started with AWS and I just stuck with it. Of course, I do other things like at my work. I deal with other cloud providers, but
Okay.
personally, I took AWS. I stuck with it, and when you get to the cloud provider, start first by learning the architecture because the architecture is what defines everything else. It's what brings all of the pieces together. The architecture is where the operations are, is where the
Okay.
networking is where the security is. So if you understand the architecture, you understand the core principles of the cloud and how it operates, and you can then move on to learn about security stuff. So first pick the cloud provider, understand the architecture, then in terms of like learning and like training, like there's different ways you can go about it, right? So I like personally now I'm trying to go for the most like the most affordable way possible. Like I don't want to be out here just spending like tons of money on like training because there's a lot of free resources about there about
Yeah.
cloud, but they don't have as much exposure as the more mainstream like cybersecurity resources.
Hmm.
There's like resources like CloudGoat. You can spin up like a vulnerable environment to your cloud environment in your cloud infrastructure and just walk through scenarios and how to like break things and like how to like defend against these things. There's a ton of blogs. There's talks on YouTube. There's books. There's so many amazing cloud books.
Yeah.
Behind me, I have like a couple of books that I'm reading. Like they have tons of like labs and projects out there. So just pick the cloud provider, understand the architecture. I would recommend like before you go into like all these labs, just try to like take like a quick like for AWS, take like the Socials Architect, like take a course. You don't have to take the certification if you don't want to. Take a course just to understand the core principles, and then when you understand the core principles, just lab it away. Like do labs, do projects, read books that have projects. Like there's tons and tons and tons of like free and affordable cloud resources out there, and I'll be sharing more on my channel because like
Okay.
it's just like it's amazing because you can right now I feel like getting into the cloud and getting into cloud security is even if you're smart about it, it might be easier than generally getting into cybersecurity in general because like
Okay.
there's so many resources out there, and if you have the core skills and the mindset and the foundations from core networking, core IT, Linux, scripting, all of those things, and you
Hmm.
apply them to the cloud stuff, then you can easily become like really really good and find yourself in really 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 awesome opportunities in terms of the cloud. So that would be my advice for anyone who wants to get into cloud or cloud security.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm pretty new to the cloud as well. I don't have that much experience when it comes to cloud pen testing, for example. So I'm here learning as well. And if you're more interested in learning new things in when it comes to cloud and cloud security, make sure you check Dave's channel. That would be awesome if you could share like those books and those free resources you're talking about in a video. I would definitely watch it.
Mhm.
But for
Most
some,
definitely.
yeah, for some reason, I usually get this question a lot, and I don't know. Maybe it's because people just want to be the most versatile they can be. But people always ask me, should we start with something more generic, and then pick a specific client vendor like the AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud? Um, but understanding what you said, it's better to pick like a specific provider like Azure, for example, and then try to understand it like the best way you can, and then expand
Mhm.
your bandwidth. Is that correct?
Yes, it's that's my approach, and that's like the strategy like I've noticed from like most people who are good at cloud security
Okay.
because eventually like the cloud space, especially with the three large cloud providers, there's so many like similarities
Okay.
at the higher level that once you understand how things work in one like environment, you just have to be able to like understand how it works in the other environment. It's like the same core principles, the same core services, the same core compute, storage,
Yeah.
function services, but you just have to understand what they're called, like the nomenclature and how this other cloud service implements them. And once you have like that core knowledge of how things work in this cloud service, then you can bring that knowledge over to apply it to the other cloud service. So for example, like I like I said, I've focused mainly on like AWS, but
Mm-hmm.
like I was recently working like a GCP project at work. I've
Mm-hmm.
never ever worked in GCP before. Like I barely know like the infrastructure in GCP, but I was kind of able to uh, transfer the knowledge that I had from AWS,
Yeah.
as little as it is, to that project I was working on, because I understand the core services. I understand like how different things work. So I was like, okay, I can bring this piece of knowledge from what I understand about how this works in AWS and apply it to how it works in GCP. I might have to
Yeah.
study more on these particular concepts or these particular servers and how it works in GCP, but I actually have some fundamental knowledge of it in AWS, so I can try to apply it. But if you are spreading yourself across like multiple places, it can be easy to like get confused, especially in the beginning, because like now you're like learning multiple things
Yeah.
simultaneously at once, and then that could like clash, and like you might eventually get confused. But
Mm-hmm.
focus on one thing, understand it very well, and then if you need, you can start branching out to other cloud providers.
Yeah, you know what? That sounds really like programming. People are so worried about picking like a programming language, especially if you're just starting your high school or something like that. And a lot of times I see this advice like just pick one and learn the fundamentals and the basics of what programming is. And then for the most part, if you take out the syntax part, the same how can I say this? Like the same concepts will apply to the other languages as well. And so yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it's very similar in that regard. And that's very good advice as well for me because I didn't knew what to do, to be honest. And now I know.
Yeah.